I like this question. When do you think were Audi's golden years? Hmm. I mean, I think a lot of us who've been in the Audi aftermarket industry for a long time, our sails are filled with the wind of the 1980s racing efforts. I know mine are and have been.
In '90s.
The 90s, yeah, which extended into the early 90s. I would say for sure Audi's dark era was kind of the early 90s,
Yeah, late '80s, '90s.
late 80s, 90s, when the racing efforts still continued, but they were winding down. They were the result of, you know, like this IMSA GTO was not developed in 1990. It was an effort from the mid 80s that continued into the 90s and ended there. But like when Audi was doing the Audi 100s and 200s and 8090s and the Coupe Quattro, that was a dark time for Audi. Their sales plummeted to almost zero, and there was even question of whether they would stay in the U.S. And the B5 A4 and the 1AT completely brought Audi out of that era into a more modern era, which I think Audi's current state is very good. But I think the golden era was when Audi innovated with Quattro and innovated with the i5 and also turbocharging. Audi was an early adopter of turbocharging. Audi did some really bold, innovative things by embracing Quattro all-wheel drive, by embracing turbocharging, by embracing this odd 5-cylinder engine, which produced more power than a 4-cylinder, but was more compact than a 6.
And yeah, more fuel efficient,
more fuel efficient than a 6-cylinder. Those were all key things. The Audi 5000 Turbo, the Audi Quattro, even the Audi 4000, to a big degree. These were epic, revolutionary cars, and there's still a huge enthusiast, community around appreciating and loving those cars. Now on the racing side, Audi did the same thing. They took all that technology to World Rally and they blew away the competition. Nobody could even compete with them. And then they brought it to the Trans Am series in the US and they destroyed everybody. And then they took it to IMSA GTO and they did something so well with those technologies that they ultimately got banned and outlawed. And in World Rally, the speeds in the cars got so fast and so crazy that it just became too dangerous, especially with all the fans. So, I speak for myself, and I think a lot of guys kind of my age, and some women too. That's kind of the golden era is Audi's efforts, racing efforts in the 80s, which ultimately bled down to the production cars. I mean, there's so many good videos. If you've never seen ESPN's Unfair Advantage, documentary,
Yep.
I believe it's all over YouTube. That documentary, I'm actually getting chills talking about it right now. That documentary changed my life. Like, there's my life, of course, meeting my wife is one of those moments, meeting my children, but professionally and kind of hobby-wise, I saw that video in an automotive program at De Anza Junior College, and that changed my life. The arc of my life was different as I left De Anza College that day. I pursued a whole different range of priorities in my life. Professionally speaking, I knew that I had to be a part of that. I wanted to do what they were doing in any way I could be. So that to me is the Audi's golden era for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those technologies. It's just like, well, why isn't this in everything? It's just that the paradigm shift of why don't you have all-wheel drive everywhere if it's just dominating everything?
Sometimes someone just sees an opportunity that for some reason nobody else has seen. I mean, it's just sitting right there in front of everyone. But Audi's innovative move was, up until then, four-wheel drive meant a huge clunky transmission, a huge transfer case, a huge rear diff. And Audi created a beautiful engineering solution where power fed out of the transmission into a into a center differential, which was inside the transmission. And then there were two counter-rotating portions inside the diff that then power would feed out to the front diff and the rear diff out of that center diff, all in the transmission itself, which was really no bigger than a normal transmission. So they created this innovation that ultimately led that technology to be put in everyday street cars and race cars. And, you couldn't take a Ford Bronco four-wheel drive and stick it into a sedan rally car, but you could, this other Quattro technology that they came up with. So